So Julie, you've been playing pickleball? Or?
Yeah, I play it
It
with
ain't
Mega,
neither.
Chan, and
I will
Mentucus.
now call this
Oh,
meeting to
I do the
order
leagues on
for a
Monday, Wednesday,
joint
Friday.
meeting
Oh,
of the
okay.
Planning
Yeah, I do
Commission
the
and the
Friday
Parks and Rec
meeting.
Committee.
Chan.
I do it at Mentucus.
Taco.
Yeah, I do the,
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
the competitive, like, I think it's 3-5.
Yeah,
You're on-
yeah, it's
you're
like,
on-
yeah.
It's
3-5
good,
plus, yeah.
it's good.
Do you want your gavel?
Because everyone's like,
Yeah.
Before we adopt the agenda tonight, I'd like to do a roll call and to get to know each other. Please state your name and committee. I will start and then I will move to my left. I'm Jarrett Kuhn. I'm on the chair of the Planning Commission.
Greg McCurry, Parks Commission. Ben Sikora, Planning Commission.
do you guys want to introduce yourselves?
Yeah, we'll do that.
I'm Holly Holly Coppold. I'm the recreation supervisor.
Alyssa Swanson, Assistant City Manager.
Jen Brinton, Canadian Economic Development Director.
Julie Murray, Planning Commission.
Jeanette June, Park and Rec.
Larry Schultz, Park and Rec.
Christian Patterson, Planning Commission.
Eric Ream, Vice Chair, Planning Commission.
Al Racias, Planning Commission.
Amanda Cahill, Park and Rec.
Wonderful. The first order of business tonight is to adopt the agenda for tonight's meeting. Commissioners, committee members, is there a motion to adopt the agenda?
I'll make a motion to adopt the agenda.
A second.
I'll second.
Got a motion made by Commissioner
Ream?
Ream and a second by Commissioner Murray. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. The motion carries. We do not have minutes for this meeting this evening, so we'll just move on to our discussion item. Our first the discussion item for tonight is the cannabis, TCH, and tobacco public use. I will turn it over to Assistant City Manager Alyssa Swanson and Community and Economic Director Jen Brewington for staff presentation, and then I will open the floor for discussion.
Wonderful. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, committee members and commissioners for being here. I know for the Parks and Rec Committee, this isn't your usual time, so thanks for being flexible and making this work. This is obviously a big conversation that we're seeing hit all local governments across Minnesota, and we are really trying to hear from the community about what is our path forward related to public use, and to give some background really on why we're here. It is really all because of Minnesota State Law, Chapter 63. So this chapter specifically, during the last legislative session, made cannabis use available, or I should say it made full decriminalization of cannabis, and it also allowed for use for adult users, people over than 21. It's about a 237-page document that gets into extreme detail over various different aspects of cannabis usage across the state of Minnesota and regulation related to it. But what's really important for today's discussion and how it really impacts local governments is this section called Section 19, subsection 5, and I'll show that on the screen in a bit. But what it does is it allows cities the authority to limit the use of cannabis products in public places, specifically our parks areas. What this chapter doesn't do is say that public use is prohibited. So it really leaves the door open for all local governments to make the decision for their own community. And that's really what we're trying to get here, is just to see as you, as our ambassadors from our community, as our advocates of our community, what are you feeling related to this topic? And so when we're talking about, I'm going to skip that slide, our today's agenda, we're going to go through some background. We're going to go over some of the state law a little bit, not spend too much time on it, but just to give you an overview and a taste of, again, why we're here and why this is important. We're going to go over some key findings, but then, again, to point to you being ambassadors and being advocates to your community, we're going to allow you guys to take the floor and really lead the discussion here and just talk about each one of these three areas: cannabis, cannabis-derived products, THC edibles of more or less what that is considered, and then tobacco. So kind of going back up to this slide here, we're really trying to hone in on these three topics and determine how do we want to have these be available in our park system. And we'll go over why we're even having this conversation in the first place too. So going back into starting with the background and going back to this chapter 63, specifically this section 19, subsection 5, this little piece, it's really small in that 237-page document, but it says that a local government may adopt an ordinance establishing a petty misdemeanor offense for anyone that's unlawfully using this substance in a public place. So what this specifically states is that in public areas, it can be open or it can be closed depending on local government's preference. And if you choose to prohibit it, there is a petty misdemeanor offense related to that. So obviously we would work with our enforcement agency, who's Carver County Sheriff's Office, to make that available. And we can't change what the offense is. The state statute makes it very clear. So we're not here to talk about what the offense level is. We're just really talking about if we want it in our parks or want people to be able to use it in our parks or not. So what another piece of the discussion we're not going to talk about today, but we wanted to just inform you on it, is the regulation of sale of cannabis products. The other piece that this chapter allows for local government agencies is the zoning authority related to businesses and where they can sell cannabis and where they can't. So right now in the city of Victoria, there is a moratorium on the sale of business selling cannabis until 2025. So that gives us and the state, because they're still kind of going through this process too, it gives all of us that flexibility and time to really research and delve into this topic of sale. And we're doing that on the staff level, and then later at the planning commission level, you're going to be talking about this as more or less zoning. So this is coming to you later, but we wanted to make sure we touch on it, but know that we're not talking about this today. We're really talking about the use of cannabis in our park system. And before I kind of move on to the next item, I also want to note when we say park system, we're not just talking about our parks like Wasserman and Rhapsody and Savannah Valley. We're talking about our entire park system. So we're talking about our trails, our outlots, and other recreational like spaces. So when we're thinking about that, it's encompassing all those community gathering spaces that are available to the public.
Does this include the rec center, or is that?
This is a great question, and hence the reason I have the Minnesota Indoor Clean Air Act on the screen right here, because this was established in 2007. As we're all aware, smoking was banned at that time in indoor spaces. But then the legislature went back and they revised it in 2019, and they expanded what that law meant. So not only is it just for smoking of tobacco, it also included the word vaping, because that got really big in that time period where you see Juuls and those other type of electronic delivery devices come to be. And then in addition to that, to your point, Chair, they also defined smoking and vaping with the use of other substances, including cannabis within this. So why is this important? When we're looking at public park spaces, we're also considering our park facilities, and because those are indoor spaces, our public restrooms, the rec center, city hall, any of those public spaces, it is prohibited under this act for anyone to be utilizing those products. That makes sense?
The rec center have more rules around it due to the fact that it's sort of a split facility with the school district as well.
That is a great question, Commissioner. Actually, we were just talking about this today. The school district does not have any other regulations related to the rec center other than related to this act. There is no smoking or vaping within the rec center space.
So something like chewing tobacco or chomping on an edible, in theory, would not be covered under this, and would be something that we would need to look at.
Absolutely. And as part of this discussion. Yep.
Thank you.
So the other code I want to bring up before I pass it over to Jen is the City of Victoria's Municipal Code, which is Chapter 18, specifically Chapter 18, which guides our use of our park spaces, specifically related to public content. It has our park hours and just really says how people can conduct themselves within our park system. The only reason I really bring this up is because it does not include anything related to smoking. And why, again, this part is important is because some cities, a long time ago in 2007, when everyone was banning indoor smoking, a lot of cities were banning the outdoor smoking in their park areas. The City of Victoria elected not to do that. So we're not covered under this ordinance to ban any sort of smoking yet, depending on where this committee wants to go. It also doesn't ban tobacco use in our park system, so currently you can smoke tobacco, you can utilize tobacco substances, to your point, Commissioner, on chewing tobacco. You can utilize and smoke cannabis products, and then you can also use edible products, hemp-derived THC. So bring that to your attention. And I just want to provide an overview on these 3 specific laws. So Minnesota Chapter 63, this legalized adult cannabis, which is why we're in this predicament now. Minnesota Clean Air Act, we know that our indoor facilities are already covered. And then municipal code from the city of Victoria, we currently do not have any language prohibiting any use of smoking products or cannabis products. So right now it is available and people can utilize these products within the city of Victoria's park spaces. So what we've done on a city staff level is we just wanted to go through some of our market cities and other communities to see what they're doing on their end. And at this point, I'm going to pass it over to Jen to just talk about the research that she and her team did. Thank you. Yeah. Switch places.
All right, perfect. So as Alyssa just mentioned, we had our planning team ask our market cities what they've got going on in their communities. And the reason why we did this is just so you can kind of see what's going on in Carver County, get your mind thinking, and just, it's helpful when you see what other cities are doing just to get the discussion started. So as you can see, I'm not going to go through all of these completely, but as you can see, Carver, Chan, Chaska, Shakopee, and Waconia are the cities that we've reached out to. We do have a larger list of other cities that are much larger than us that we will bring forward at a probably further discussion when we talk about like zoning and regulations and policies, things like that. But I just wanted to have you take note of what's going on around us. So for example, Carver, they are prohibiting smoking in parks, cannabis, and THC. Chanhassen, they prohibit smoking in their parks, cannabis, and THC. Chaska, they're just doing the tobacco right now. They right now also have a moratorium like we do, and they haven't really determined what they're going to do in their public space right now and in their parks. Shakopee is a little bit different. I'm going to go into what Shakopee's doing in just a second because I want you to see different examples of what a larger city is doing and other options. This topic isn't yes or no, and when we get into the Shakopee discussion, you'll see what I mean in a second. And then Waconia, they prohibit smoking in their parks as well for cannabis and THC. And I do want to just mention that when we talk about public place and public spaces, each one of these cities defined it a little bit differently too. So it's not, you know, a park is a public space for Chan where it might not be a public space for a different city or a community center. So down the road, when we talk about what a public place is, to Alyssa's point, we have to define what that means in the future here. So City of Shakopee, like I mentioned. So as you can see, they really truly defined what those spaces are. So they looked at their swimming beaches, their playgrounds, public restrooms, outdoor facilities such as their shelters, their sports fields, and any places where they do private or public events. So we could get as specific as this, or we could just say yes or no. So this just kind of gives you an option and an idea to think about how we could be not super specific, but we could really define what those public places are. Okay. And then we just wanted to mention too that we do have community partners that we're working with, that we're going to continue to work with. So right now we do work with the Carver County Sheriff's Office, and the arrangement is significant because if we're going to enforce anything, they are going to be the entity in that organization that's going to enforce it within our public spaces. And it just is a really great partnership to make sure that they are upholding any of our city ordinances that we have and our zoning regulations with the enforcement piece. And then the Carver County Public Health, they play a vital role because, as you know, they maintain the health and well-being of our residents and businesses within Carver County. Their efforts really contribute to promoting that health and wellness and any concerns that the public health or public safety may have within cannabis, tobacco, and any THC products. Okay, so with that,
Just ask real quick,
yeah.
why are we throwing tobacco in here with cannabis and THC and leaving alcohol out?
That's a great question. You know, we didn't necessarily consider alcohol, but that's something that we can definitely take a look into. We really wanted to talk about cannabis, but we knew because one of the biggest concerns with cannabis use is the smell of smoke. That's what we've heard from our other communities that surround us. We wanted to bring tobacco to the plate because similar to cannabis smoking, you do have a smell. So that was our primary thought process behind that. Of course.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I mean, when you talked about our own municipal code in chapter 18, it does have some stipulations in there about liquor, as well as like glass beverage containers and things like that being prohibited in the parks.
So
it
wasn't brought up in
But
Okay.
sections.
Yeah,
Section 1823 allows for the use or possession and consumption of malt liquor or wine by anyone aged 21 or above in a park. So we're allowing that in the city right now. And that was changed in like 2019, I think, as I was looking at.
I wouldn't necessarily know the exact
So I
date,
just was
but
doing,
yeah.
was it before that? There's some amendments, but it's allowed for now, right?
Is there any reason why hard liquor wasn't included in that?
Yeah,
What's the
that's a good
difference
question.
between malt liquor, wine? Why was hard liquor left out of it?
I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, and I think that would be something that we could bring back to the Parks Committee for further review if that's something that, you know, obviously we're seeing a concern in. Currently, you know, we've been having this rule for quite some time and we're not necessarily seeing issues with it. We actually see a lot of usage for it, specifically for our Bayfront Park, which is right here. So a lot of community events like our classic car night, it seems to work in favor for those activities. But obviously if, you know, city council thinks that looking at our ordinance related to alcohol is something that we need to take a look at, I'd bring that back to the Parks Committee.
The only reason I bring this whole thing up is it seems to me that we're talking about 3 or 4 different items that are legal but maybe not favorable in the citizens' eyes. And I think they should sort of be grouped together as one entity. I mean, why would we want to have 4 separate laws, one for cannabis, one for THC, one for alcohol, and one for malt liquor and wine? It just seems to me we're creating more problems trying to be perfect when, you know, perfection is the enemy of good. And I think that that's what we sort of need to look at.
Yeah, and I think that's what this committee is here to discuss. So with that, we do have 3 boards up here. So what we're going to do on a staff level is we're going to turn it over to you all to kind of discuss and figure out and just let us know what your thoughts are. And I think those are really good points. So we're going to jot them down. We're going to put them up here. So then at the end of this discussion, we at least have them captured, and then we can determine what our next phase is.
Jen, when you were looking at the other cities, did you also look at the Three River Park District and if they have any rules and regulations that are, because some of that falls to Victoria and borders Victoria, I could see people in the campgrounds and the trails here. I mean, where does it stop and end? I think that they should be cohesive.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And I sit on the Carver County Parks Commission, and we're having a discussion currently right now too. They haven't determined what they're doing. And we've discussed internally, do we follow what they do? You know, do we wait and see? So that's why we're having the discussion today. We didn't feel comfortable enough at a staff level to say, okay, we're gonna do exactly what they're doing. So we really just wanted your feedback. And once we know what they're gonna do, hopefully it'll be soon, then we'll be able to relay that information to all of you and see if it fits within our values and what we wanna do here.
Have you had a chance to research what other communities in other states that have had cannabis approved for some time, what they've done in their parks and what the pros and cons, you know, are there any issues? And if so, what are they? Have you had a chance to look at that yet?
I can answer that, Chair. The difference between us and other states is that other states have chosen within their law to ban cannabis use publicly, where Minnesota has left it open to the cities. So we are significantly different in that aspect.
Okay, so basically it's not allowed in the other states. Okay.
But
By state.
I believe Florida allows it, correct, in public use. And I think New York might as well, because in both, traveling to both of those locations, I had to explain the smell to my children. So I'm pretty sure.
State of Washington.
Yeah, there's states that are now open to it being in public use.
Being a recent transplant from California, I think I can speak a little bit to it. Our house happened to be the second one up from a fairly sizable park. And I'll tell you, there was never a sign for no smoking, no alcohol use, no cannabis use. Everybody seemed to be more worried about the dog poop and making sure it was picked up. And people were more upset than that than anything else. You know, so, yeah.
I would just voice a concern about smoking and anything that could start a fire in a park. And that's why I think the no smoking whatever would be appropriate in a park that could burn, right? Aside from that, it seems pretty difficult to you know, put it on the law enforcement to try to enforce something that sometimes you can tell, sometimes you can't. Like, that'd be very difficult. Similar to alcohol, you pick somebody up and have they had a beer or not? Okay, well, you're in a park. What really is the enforcement of that?
Well, and what is the actual, like, fine or repercussion of a petty misdemeanor anyway? Like, is it worth enforcement? I don't know.
$50.
Yeah, $50 or
Yeah,
something.
so I could imagine that the, law enforcement might be
$50
like,
times served.
I'm not gonna, go give you a drug test to figure this out.
Well, we have one sheriff that patrols or is dedicated to the city of Victoria. I'd rather that person be doing something a little bit more important.
Me too.
And my fear is whatever legislation we put together, isn't policed very well, and it becomes, the number 4 bullet point on Nextdoor with the Nextdoor police going through and, taking pictures of people and posting them, and, it just becomes, coyotes, speed, and dog poop, and now pot smoking on the website. So I don't want to see that either. Not that that's the topic here. We're more on the laws as opposed to the executive side, but where do we want our enforcement to spend their time?
That's kind of one of the things in looking at the slides. The responsibility would be with the county sheriff's office.
Similar to what it is today, correct? If there was an incident, we would call them, they would respond, it would get out of city staff hands, and they would continue the process.
Have you had any discussions with law enforcement on their, because unenforceable laws are really worthless. It's like cities that ban fireworks in the city limits and everybody shoots fireworks off and nobody ever gets in trouble for it, right? I mean,
Yeah.
like, it's not enforceable.
Which happens
Every 4th of July,
year,
every
2 years,
yeah.
and it's happened every year.
So have there been any discussions with law enforcement on this specifically?
We have talked to the sheriff's office briefly on it, and because Carver County as an entity hasn't quite determined what they're doing, they're kind of holding off on making any determinations. But we did ask if they've received complaints at this time from the communities that have banned it. And one, they said it's relatively low, but they also wanted to make the note that it's technically not legal to buy cannabis, the smokable cannabis right now, so they're not really seeing it just because it's not available regularly.
So that was going to be my question. So I found that, our county, our Carver County has a tobacco-free open spaces policy, and this limits, the use of tobacco in outdoor spaces. And it's actually defined as prohibited on Carver County beaches, prohibited in play areas, and within 25 feet from parks and recs buildings. So as a county, someone is already enforcing these tobacco use prohibited rules. I wonder if in their experience, or in their discussions, are they just considering adding cannabis to these smoking, ordinances that are already in place that cover these spaces?
Yeah, when it comes to exactly where in the code they're gonna place it, I don't think they have a lot of discussion. That's more on a staff level and on a legal level, where are you gonna put it? I think once we kind of hear from the committee and hear from council of exactly where we're gonna wanna go. We're gonna wanna work with our attorney and our city clerk to determine where's the best fit for our code. So to answer that, I don't know if I have a specific
Yes.
answer for you. And I think
So
it depends
to-
on how defined they wanna get.
Yeah, so to someone else's point earlier, like Carver Park Reserve seems to me that is already covered under this.
The difference between Carver Park Reserve, and I want to make note of that, is that's governed by the Three Rivers Park District.
Okay.
So it is different than other, like
Okay.
Waconia Regional Park is a Carver County
Got it.
park, so that one would
Okay.
be
They have
separate.
their own policing. But I just want to clarify a minute, were you saying that Carver County?
Carver County.
Carver, so wouldn't that cover?
If they have.
That does
cannabis.
not, to answer that. Those are just specifically parks that are managed by Carver County. So it's not all of Carver County, it's Carver County parks. So that's a
Because-
great point.
Three Rivers has its own police force,
Yes.
is what I understood, yeah.
But I'm just
And our
saying,
city
there's,
parks
there's
are-
like Carver as a, like broad,
county.
right? They're our county. I know, it's not like they're managing our parks, but they have parks that are already under these type of ordinances or prohibitions.
But that wouldn't protect our parks because our parks are considered Victoria parks, not Carver County parks.
Yeah, I
But-
understand that. What I'm saying
But
is
it's
they
already
already
been-
have a model.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what we're saying. If
In
they've got
place.
a model,
And they already have experience, like if their sheriffs are finding this hard to enforce or whatnot, or if, it would be interesting to see if, because they already have this in place, if they're just going to add on, well, now also include smoking of cannabis, which seems to be a tie or whatnot.
What is a Carver County park? That wouldn't be a city park. I was just trying to think of one.
Baylor Park, in between Nordjung America and New Germany is example. Waconia's Regional Park would be an example.
Okay.
Minnewaska would be another
Minnewaska
one.
Regional, wouldn't that be Hennepin? No? Oh, okay. Oh, I was thinking of,
yeah, I'm thinking.
oh, North to 7.
Yeah, yeah,
I never got it.
yeah.
Okay, so there's a few. Do we know what Three Rivers is going to do? We don't know.
No, we haven't decided yet.
Since trails are included, and I know the answer to this amongst this group probably, but it's just something to think about. Is this also gonna include sidewalks?
At this time, no. Within our park system, sidewalks are not included.
So in theory, I could be walking around, let's just say, my neighborhood, which has a city trail along the backside of a reservoir, and then once I hit the front side, I hit sidewalk, I could start, whatever I'm doing wouldn't be protected under the topics that we are discussing, because we have a lot of trails that intersect with city sidewalks. And I know that's kind of like the other department, like streets and stuff like that versus Park and Rec, but
So that's an interest, so, yeah, so regardless of what we're talking about, sidewalks are not part of this conversation,
Public use.
but a trail
But a trail
going through the
is.
same neighborhood is.
Which is interesting because they're used as the same. In
Well,
fact,
that's-
some of
I
the
think that's
connections
the
are on the
point.
sidewalks.
That's my
point
point.
of trying to be perfect instead of good.
And the sidewalks are technically on city property, because they're
Yeah,
city
I was on a
easements.
sidewalk, Mr. Officer, I can do whatever I want here.
And I think that's,
Is there something in the law now that, about public use, just this, in the state ordinance? I mean, can you use, can we legally in the state of Minnesota, use cannabis in a public space?
So I'm going to address your question first, and then I want to go back to that conversation on sidewalks quick. So technically in the state of Minnesota, they just leave it up to the local government agencies. So if in a government agency such as the City of Victoria, if they don't have any rules that prohibit the use, yes, you can legally. If they already have rules that do prohibit it, like the market cities we were looking at, then you cannot. So related to sidewalks, the state law has very specific guidelines on what is a public space. It's trying to get to a perfect system and trying to figure out what's the best way to get there. So public space is really broad, and there's not really clear definition of exactly what it is. It's specific, but it doesn't actually give you a lot of direction on what a public space is. So to try and simplify it, we're trying to focus on just our park system. But if there's like as you pointed out, there's something really overlaps with that, sidewalks, that we can include within our definition of a public space here today. So we can include that. That makes
So
sense.
your question is, do you have some sort of ordinance that potentially limits it in public spaces versus specific park spaces, right? That's kind of.
I don't know, I just
in
threw
your
it out
Or-
there, I don't have any of the answers.
Well, I mean, at Chanhassen just in August, they actually had two separate measures. One that banned smoking of both cannabis and tobacco in the park specifically, and another that prohibited smoking cannabis but not tobacco in public places more generally. So that's how Chanhassen addressed what you're talking about.
So it's two separate
Yeah.
parks, and then future, once we further understand what a public space is, then kind of getting into, okay, what do we want to do for the rest of our public spaces?
Does the indoor statute already protect a certain percentage of distance from the doors of public spaces, or no? So I can walk right outside the door and at this point could theoretically smoke anything I want.
I think most cities have a sign. that
Yeah,
says
most signs say
smoking,
25 feet away.
25 feet away.
Well, I know
exactly.
Eden Prairie does, but I don't think I've never seen that sign in Victoria.
You walk outside of Vic's and they're smoking right
Right
outside.
at the door, yeah, that's what I was thinking.
You know,
Like you
or
kind of have to
Floyd's.
go tunnel through.
But the 25 feet was basically what my understanding was, government buildings, medical buildings, such buildings, not necessarily bars or restaurants or anything like that.
Like in Eden Prairie, it's at the mall doors at 25 feet. So I think it's city. That's why I was asking if we did anything like that, but I didn't think we did. Just want to make sure people weren't just breaking the law. Because it could be.
I have to go back to the kind of enforceability of any of this, or unenforceability of any of this. Have any cities just said, let's give it a year and see if there are any complaints? I mean, is everybody really gonna go gather in the park to smoke weed? Or is it like gonna be really a non-issue? Like, people are already doing it today. Go walk around, right? So that's kind of, in my mind, like, is it going to be, like, are we gonna get a bunch of complaints? We're probably already getting calls, like the sheriff or whoever. So is it, which side of, like, do you create something to chase an issue that may not be there? Or do you just kind of go, yeah, it is what it is?
I think it's a good point, but I think as the availability becomes more by legalizing, selling, et cetera, could be potentially more problems or issues, but I agree with you.
It could be, but I guess I've always weighed on the side of, you can put a bar on every corner and there's only a certain amount of people that are gonna go to the bar.
Right.
You know, like, the people that I know that use cannabis have been using it for years. It hasn't changed, you know? I mean, just now it's
But
legal.
they currently use it in their house and now they may use it outside.
Potentially, I don't know, maybe.
I just think of like a young family with children in the park, you know, watching the movie in the park in the 7 o'clock in the summer, sitting there and the next blanket over there, somebody's smoking cannabis. And then it's upon them to complain to the city to get some kind of ordinance in place or to get some kind of help with that. I worry about the children. Like, I will tell you, I will never go back to Miami again in my life because of the innate, everywhere you go, you could not walk without feeling like you were smelling of smoke.
I mean, saying no smoking in general in a park is, seems not that controversial just because of the
Children
other environmental risk. So you don't have to say you personally are doing something I don't agree with and want to protect. You could say, this is our asset that we want to protect. It's a park. We don't want cig butts or fire.
Yeah. I mean, that's what like our code says, the purpose is to protect the city parks and recreation areas and all persons within those boundaries and regulate use in the parks and our areas. So I mean, like, I completely agree with that, and it seems like if we have restrictions on glass beverage containers, but we have nothing on smoking at all, even, tobacco, it just seems like there is a miss in there right now.
Well, and I think if somebody has a THC gummy, I don't know if they've drank a beer or had that or had nothing.
You're not
I think
really
that's
disturbing your experience
That's not
there.
disturbing me or my family or little kids, and, unless they're out of control, and that's a whole nother statute, I believe. So I don't,
And I think that gets to the point of
There's no fire.
conditioning, to
Yeah.
the point of the people who smoke or use cannabis. If they want to come to the park, watch the movie, and they know
get a
that
gummy.
derivatives are allowed, they can have a drink.
Right.
They may
Have a malt
choose
beverage.
to do the thing
In a
that
plastic
doesn't
cup.
compromise other people, and
Yeah.
it doesn't create a fire risk, but it allows them to do whatever they want to do legally. Yes, it's the tobacco, using chew versus having a cigarette. It probably isn't the same experience, but it's the lesser of annoying the people around you or creating the situation where parents have to explain what's happening right next to them.
Well, I didn't realize that we didn't have a smoking, regulation in parks or whatever. So whether it's cannabis or tobacco, somebody's smoking a cigarette, it's like, oh, I don't want to smell that either. So for me, I would not separate out. I would just say smoking of any product in the park systems or on the trails. Keeps it clean.
Yeah, you'd have to define it, right? Smoking to include all of a cigar, a
right.
pipe of
Yeah, I think it
marijuana,
would have to be
whatever,
everything.
right? Which I don't disagree with, because it's more irritating than anything. It's like, you don't want to smell it, you don't want to be walking through the cloud of whatever. I don't disagree with that at
Do
all.
It's
vape products smell, and are they a fire risk?
I don't know, I don't
I
vape.
don't know.
Well, I don't know.
They won't allow them on planes. I don't know why that would be,
Yeah.
but, so they must have
That's the
some.
batteries.
Is that it? I was like, there's
same thing as
something. I don't know what it
lithium.
would be.
I honestly don't know.
They do,
But, yeah.
they do have a smoke smell, or when they exhale, it's not like tobacco, but they, whatever. It's not as noticeable, but there is if you.
Did that,
And it's not fire.
Carver counties have smoking and vaping as a,
Well, for Chanhassen,
Chan.
vaping
Right.
specifically was called out as falling under the city's definition of smoking.
okay.
So that's
There you
how
go.
they covered it.
It almost sounds like there's a consensus around not infringing on people who choose not to. So, I mean, whatever we come up with, that seems to be, one thing. I haven't heard anybody speak against that.
Because I'm also looking at like Lions Park, do they have is there a designated smoking area or anything out there?
Sorry. I don't know that there's a designated smoking area, but I think they do allow smoking outside of the facility. I believe there is like a cigarette dispenser ashtray thing, whatever the thing is called. A cigarette ashtray.
I'm just using it as an example because there's events there and people are, I mean, they have a liquor license, they have, but yet it's considered, I think, one of the city parks too, so,
You can smoke in your car, probably.
well, yeah.
Or walk across the street on the sidewalk.
I don't think anybody knows that,
Yeah.
except for Christian.
Well, you get into the smokeless tobacco too. Are there, 25 violations in each dugout every time there's a baseball game going on?
Right.
But again, I think unless they're spitting everywhere, I think we're all kind of thinking if it's bothering the people around
Yeah.
you, it's probably something we want to protect the citizens around. But if it's things that may not have an effect on the people around you, then unless I'm out of order, like with alcohol, then it's probably not, the same thing.
And I think that back to the enforceability, to try to tell somebody, like, we're not gonna allow edibles or beverages in a park, you're, good luck, like, how are you ever gonna enforce that? But the smell of the, yeah. But
We
like,
would never know.
somebody's
You never know.
smoking something is pretty apparent, right? You can smell it.
That
And
would be
again,
like saying you can't take a, pharmaceutical pill. How would we know they're taking a pharmaceutical pill?
yeah.
I mean, that's
wouldn't.
kind of the practical thing down, because it's not available, it sounds like. So we're thinking about that future, and those seem really hard and kind of innocuous, and more to the point of someone having a beer. It's now legal, whether an individual choice, but that doesn't present kind of the secondhand smoke, kind of those, I'm now infringing on your personal comfort. And it gets to the safety issue.
Enforceability is gonna come when, just like public intox,
That's it.
or you're
Right.
being
Whose
a
rights are we gonna
nuisance.
enforce? As this gentleman said, the person who supposedly is having his clean air fouled, so he has a right to that. But I also have a right to smoke cannabis or tobacco because it is a legal product. So you're infringing on my rights by not letting me do that. Which one are we gonna
So if you're not risking the asset of the park, you know what I mean, like,
Right.
ashes or fire.
Or the health of the person standing next to you that doesn't want to inhale it.
I
There's
think that they went through the same kind of conversations around public spaces or just indoor spaces when they did the indoor statute, because that said, the same thing could be said about that. But at the time, there was conversations that said, but it does, because it's indoor, affect me. If I do it, you're gonna be like moving to the next row over if you don't like it. And outdoors, you could do that too, but it's still like you're sitting there in a park with your family.
I think that's a key point. I think that if it would prohibit families from taking their kids to the park because people choose to meet there every Wednesday and Thursday night to smoke weed, and so now I'm not gonna take my kids to the park because I don't wanna expose them to that. I don't think we want that to happen either. And not that it would. I don't know what's the problem. The whole thing, getting to your point, I've lived here for almost 7 years, and I don't spend every day in a park, but I go through parks, I'm on trails. I can't ever remember seeing anybody smoking. I haven't been looking for that, but I don't see people smoking, I don't see people drinking. I'm guessing they do at times when they go have a picnic or at Lions Park. I think they probably do, but I don't think out there.
Softball tournaments, yeah.
But, so, do we want to be proactive, or, that's the other thing. We want to get out in front of it, or do we want to wait and see what happens? You cause more problems, more controversy if you wait until somebody does it, then somebody thinks I've been here in this park and I've been doing that, now you're telling me I can, as opposed to starting and saying you can't. The vast majority of people are gonna follow what the ordinance says, some won't, some are gonna ignore it. Whether, we choose to enforce it or not, it's a whole separate issue. But at least if we do have something, there is the ability to enforce it if it's out of hand. Where if you don't have anything, then you're.
Right, it's kind of like, drinking and driving. There's a law against it, people still do it. They get caught, they don't get caught, they cause accidents, they cause issues. But there's regulations on it, and that's really what we're looking at doing, is putting something out there that has something that we can stand behind that says, this is what the city of Victoria wants to do. Now, if you don't want to follow the rules, you can go somewhere else, or, and if you do it and nobody's there to catch you, that's gonna happen anywhere. But you need regulations so that you are able to, if something does happen, they don't come back to the city and say, well, you didn't have a cannabis ordinance, so they come back and sue the city because it's the city's fault for not doing the ordinance. I don't, you know, again, you're getting into a legal situation where whose responsibility is it?
Jen, can you put back up the slide that has the different cities and what they're doing?
So,
So it looks like the Carver hasn't taken it on, or they took it on and decided to let people smoke.
My understanding is they allow people to smoke tobacco.
So they did make a change to their ordinances, or we did, or it's just been that way
They
always?
prohibit cannabis in the park but not smoking.
They specifically discussed cannabis, not necessarily tobacco, so they didn't think about that level. They were just really talking about cannabis when they were looking at this. Same with Waconia, they're in the similar boat. Chaska has already banned smoking tobacco. That's pretty common across the metro area. And similar with Chanhassen, they already had tobacco banned, and then they went back and then banned cannabis.
And Chaska hasn't done that yet, but they might?
Yeah, and I think it's worth the note, to Greg's point on cities that are waiting. We did do a market city study, and we have a number of market cities. The ones that aren't up here, the reason we put Chaska up here because of the tobacco, and it's a city close to us, but the majority of our market cities haven't done anything yet. They're either waiting or they're just trying to see what's going to happen once it becomes legal to purchase. So they're just kind of waiting out and seeing what's going on. Or they've banned smoking in their general municipal code already, so they're not really caring.
And again, when does it become legal to purchase?
2025. So licensing is through the state of Minnesota, and they're creating their Office of Cannabis Management, who will manage the licensing process. So until that gets going, and they're anticipating January 1, 2025, until that gets going, technically sale of cannabis is not legal in the state of Minnesota outside of reservations.
But you can have your own if you want to, a plant, and smoke that if you want to?
You can grow cannabis on your own
That's what I thought.
legally. And just as we're talking about parks, you cannot grow cannabis in community gardens. We did double check on that. But you can grow it and then smoke it if you grow your
Wherever you
own.
want, if there's not a.
Yep.
So it could be in the parks tomorrow if somebody wanted to.
Yes.
So it's not like waiting for it to be sold.
That's what, that's what I'm trying to.
Yeah, I think it's back, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say that I think so many cities and parks are covered because they already have no smoking policies. So that's where I keep feeling that we're really missing. So I would encourage everyone, and I don't know if you guys can send this out, but tobaccofreeparks.org. There's a 22-page document. It's a study by the U of M, and then it also lists every single Minnesota community that has tobacco-free parks and when they've put these policies in place. And it has information on what park directors have said about like enforcement or benefits or some of the, you know, like it, the major conclusion, it says majority of Minnesotans support tobacco-free park and recreation policies, and park staff have experienced few problems but many benefits with the policies, and would overwhelmingly recommend tobacco-free policies to other communities. So like it really has a lot of info as it relates to tobacco and smoking, and then I feel that other cities are just adding on. Like Eden Prairie has prohibited the use of tobacco in parks for more than 20 years. And so just in July of 2023, they just had to update signage in their parks to make it clear that smoking or vaping cannabis was also off limits as well. So like, I don't really think they're going to have a huge pushback or, you know, citizens coming and saying you're infringing on my rights when it's like been there for so long and they're just updating what's already there in place.
Yeah, I agree. I think at least our starting point should be the smoking of tobacco products. I don't think we need to have a policy of smoking and then a separate one saying, yeah, you can smoke tobacco, but you can't smoke cannabis. It's like, I think we just need to follow that and say smoking
You're saying more
of
about
tobacco, yeah. Kind
overall.
of an umbrella one in our parks and trails.
Yeah, then we're gonna cross into the trails, the sidewalks, and chew.
Well,
Where does that all end up?
Tobacco is,
Variances.
We're gonna grant
It's
the
just
Lions
smoke on my
Park
sidewalk.
variance to all, for snooze, or snuff.
well, they
I-
haven't, evidently they haven't
Perfection
run
is
into
the
that in
enemy
like an Eden Prairie or anything.
Well, I know,
so,
I'm just
yeah.
saying, it's just,
Christopher, you
Well, it
always
would take
have.
somebody complaining,
Playing
and
back,
if
yeah.
somebody's like got a dip in and is
Yeah.
playing pickleball, are you complaining?
Yeah.
Only if they're
Yeah.
spitting on you.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, is there a kind of comparable with Eden Prairie? How many smoking violations have they responded to in the past 10 years?
I mean, yeah, like
Yeah,
this,
it's
this,
like-
this says,
You
like,
know.
changes after implementation, like, you know, again, this is from U of M research or whatever. 74% reported no problems with policy violators. Like, so, I don't know if they're just, again, if no one's complaining or, you know, there's not a big patrol needed out there, if generally people are following the posted signs, right? And no one really, you know, it's just saying that violations are, it wasn't a big concern.
right,
Well,
I
and
think it's
that's
kind of
the
like
thing
if
is-
you're,
oh.
you know, at Round Lake Park on, you know, 4th of July, and there's officers there, and somebody starts smoking, they probably go up to them and say, hey, there's no smoking, put it out. And now if they sit there and argue with you, they're gonna push it. Most people are gonna say, okay, fine. You
Well, and
caught me.
that's what
and-
I'm wondering, in our parks on 4th of July or down there, do we have a lot of, so if we were to enact something that stops that, I mean, is it an issue now in our parks?
I'm trying to
Cigarette
think like on
smoking?
car nights down, I guess I've never noticed it.
I don't
on
know
car
that
nights?
I've ever noticed it, but, I mean, to that kind of concept that
I've noticed it.
with smoking, if we do it, which I'm not disagreeing with the idea, I'm wondering how many people are gonna be annoyed, or how is that? Is it an issue now? I don't know. I mean, I've never
I think
smelled a
people-
cigarette in town.
Somewhat,
like
I think
walking
people
around.
have gotten
Don't
used to it, I think somewhat, I don't
I
know.
think you see it outside the door of the bars.
Bars and,
I mean, pretty much. But
or the mall, or.
yeah, like people go outside. I mean, most people try to be respectful of others. And I think that's why people vape instead of smoke, because they know that's a least offensive mechanism than smoking and blowing it on you.
So maybe a broader perspective, you know, why do we have parks? We have parks to promote recreation. We promote recreation because we're promoting health and, you know, getting people active. So if we look at it from a health perspective, wellness perspective, or why we even have parks, to encourage people to be outdoors, to enjoy themselves, cut down on, you know, health issues. Perhaps we should, if we look at it like that, then we'd say maybe we shouldn't be, people can find some other place to smoke. The other thing is, and I haven't noticed this anyplace, but, or in our parks anyway, but I know places where people are allowed to smoke, even if they aren't, they're throwing their cigarette butts, and, I mean, it's a mess in some places where that's allowed. And, again, I haven't noticed that being a problem in our parks, but they can be. But I guess if we look from a broader perspective from health, then I think, you know, lean towards, let's just say no.
Yeah, as a matter of public policy, then we promote wellness, and so therefore we ban smoking and
Well, are we
public
trying
parks
to
and
change
trails.
this tobacco laws here, or are we talking about cannabis?
I
It
would
sounds
say
to me like you're
tobacco.
talking about
I'd say,
tobacco.
I'd say.
Which would
I'd say
include
both,
cannabis.
but
I
Yeah.
don't think it should be included in that regard. Why
Both.
is there a 237-page report then on cannabis that probably doesn't include tobacco in it, does it?
That is just specifically the cannabis law.
Thank you very much.
There was probably a whole bunch of stuff on that back in the day,
2019.
yeah, back when the things went into.
I just want to make a point about the Market City review, because there was some information regarding Carver County and not allowing smoking in their parks. And the Market City review is based on the city of Carver, not the Carver County. Moving on to THC edible use prohibited in park, does that mean, you know, I'm driving down the road and I don't know what the rules are, I don't use edibles, but if I pop an edible in, I can't go to the park, or is that just me using it in the park?
That's a great question.
I want to clarify, by state statute, you can't utilize cannabis or cannabis-derived products while operating a vehicle, and they're very specific on where those products can be located in your vehicle if you're transporting them, and I'm not going to get into that law today, but we don't touch that. This would just be specifically use in parks. You can still possess them, so I want to clarify that too when we're talking about questionable enforcement. Anybody can possess hemp-derived products in cannabis legally now, up to a certain amount. So they can walk into the park and just have them in their pocket. In those cities, they can't ingest them, but they can still possess them.
Yeah.
Well, and my guess is use means being under the, like actually not just putting it in your mouth, but actually having it in your system. 'Cause
Just
you're still using it.
use.
If
Just
it's in your
use.
system.
Not, like, you could technically ingest it at home, walk
Larry
to a
drives
park,
me to the
and
park.
then, and then still be under the influence.
Yeah, under the influence, that's what I was
Yes.
trying, so then you'd still be prohibited, I mean, that'd still be.
Larry drives me to the park, and then he gets out, he gets on the sidewalk and uses it, and enters the park, he's totally fine.
No, he's violating because he's still in use.
No,
No,
in,
he's
Under the
under
influence.
under the
He's under
influence
the
is different than
influence.
use.
Oh, well, what, how do they define use?
It would
Actually
be like.
Sitting there eating them?
Yes, ingesting, smoking,
that's kinda
yeah, the
silly.
active use of,
So that's where I wanted to make sure I was
So
clear on that.
that's silly.
yes.
Because
There's
then,
questions on that.
Yeah,
then we
but-
get into the health aspects, and isn't there like medical, I don't know, like medical marijuana and stuff? I'm fortunate enough not to experience people that have had to have that or have chosen that side, but then are you saying those people can't go to the park? Well, no, we're saying they can, but they just couldn't take their dosage in the park,
They couldn't smoke it in the park.
or chew on it in the park, yeah.
So you can't bring your marijuana brownies to the picnic at the park now,
No.
like
have to
Hannah.
have them before.
You gotta eat them.
You
You
gotta
can
have
carry
them
them
on the
around.
sidewalk.
Yeah, drive after you
You
eat.
can carry them around, but you can't eat them.
You can have them in your pocket,
Okay.
on the sidewalk after.
You can bring your Tupperware, but you better keep it closed.
Bring a dish to share, and then somebody,
Just make sure you walk off into the street before you eat this.
I,
These questions are exactly why we're having this conversation via committee, because as staff, we're somewhat just as confused.
Yeah, that
It's
can
very
bring us way down.
complex.
And just, I mean, from a state standpoint, you know, why they didn't come up with just the regulations that instead of having every municipality deal with this issue is beyond me, because they're gonna have such a mishmash of all different things and nobody's really gonna know. You know, if you go to a different town.
Self-governance.
Yeah.
Maybe they ran out of time and they said, "Okay, let's just not
We
do
need to
it."
push this
What's the
through.
state parks do?
I don't know. I don't have that.
So,
I was like,
Three
I think
Rivers
Amanda might be
State
on
Park.
it.
Well, I'm seeing, no, I mean, I just have this, you know,
Think
I
so.
just, I mean,
I don't think you can smoke cigarettes in a state park.
I don't know.
It
There's
feels
fire
like,
hazards.
yeah, I don't think
yeah,
you
yes,
can.
you know, you have grills and fire pits and everything
Right.
else
Yeah.
in parks, so I don't know if it's a fire, I mean, the fire hazard thing,
But that's pretty regulated though, about where the
yeah,
fire
it
pits can
is,
be.
yeah, you do have
Yeah.
to be in certain fire
Yeah.
rings or whatever, but I think it's a total, like, the smoking and like the, hey, I'm walking through this cloud of smoke is something that is totally separate from an edible or a beverage or
Yeah,
anything.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
you know, and I have children, and I don't wanna go to a concert and be sitting next to that either, you know, but me, I would probably just turn to the person and be like, why don't you go stand a little further away from my kids, you know, and then hopefully it didn't escalate, but, you know.
Well, and
that
that's the
would-
thing, if someone wants to have a beverage or whatever, I kind of think it's the same as having a beer in the park
Yeah.
at this point.
Right,
I mean, the choice has been made,
yeah,
you know.
exactly. But the smoking thing, it permeates,
Yeah,
it spreads,
exactly.
and it,
That's,
and
and
it,
someone
well, no
can-
matter what they're,
someone
what
has a
someone's smoking,
Yeah.
right?
If they know they're going to the park and they know there's a set of like limitations, but there's a lane that they can do what they want,
Yeah,
it's, and then it gets to, are they acting, you know? Someone with too many beers acts the fool pretty often, and, you know, it could be the same with that. I don't know.
I mean,
and public intoxication is public intoxication,
Exactly. It's,
so.
Right, whether,
it's a different
No
offense. at
matter
that
what
point.
you're intoxicated on,
Right.
it's still public intoxication, so.
There hasn't been any definition though of intoxication on cannabis, has there?
yes.
Really?
Yes,
'Cause I know it's
there's a
0.8
limit.
on alcohol,
Yeah,
but there's no way to test for it right now.
They've come up with some testing on it, yes.
I don't want to speak to the testing just because we're not 100% sure on that.
Yeah.
I'm
I
dealing
think
with
disorderly
it at work
conduct
on
is
drug
pretty
testing,
broad,
so.
whether you're under the influence or not.
yeah, and we have disorderly conduct in our
Yeah.
ordinances relating to parks and open spaces, correct?
I have to look exactly at the language. I think just in general, there's a disorderly conduct ordinance.
Like behavior,
Right.
Yeah.
behavior in the
related to
park,
public
something,
safety.
like,
Even on the sidewalks.
Noxious behavior, noise violations, gone through them all.
I have,
You can smoke on the sidewalk, but don't be disorderly when you do it.
Test like that.
I have one other question related to the rec center specifically, because I may or may not have been having a beer in
They
the
can
parking
do,
lot
they
there
can force
during
them to do
hockey
a drug
tryouts.
test, yeah.
And the parents
They-
may or
they-
may not have been told that it's school grounds, and so you
I
can't
don't-
drink in the parking lot at
I
the
don't
rec
think
center.
it's,
I don't think it's school.
That was kind of my question.
And so there was like this, okay, can we have a
in your
beer
system
out in
while
the
you're
parking lot
driving,
while we're waiting for our kid to get out
you're
of
in- it's
tryouts,
zero-
'cause you
it's
can't
either
be in the
zero
building
or
for
you are.
tryouts,
It's-
right? So, but then we're like, no, because it's school property, but we're like, not really. So that's another question
There's no such.
for,
Oh, I'm not saying, right, there isn't.
where does
that,
the school
You do know
property
the
But,
end and where does it begin?
Yeah, it's a partially school
Right.
district, part
But
city
usually
of
the
Victoria
offices-
building, so it
right.
is kind of convoluted that way. As
So-
a facility,
Right.
we
They're-
don't allow alcohol in the space.
Right,
cause see, like our work, it's zero tolerance, period.
in the
That's the way the
space.
federal.
I would also
federal
include parking
DOT
lots
In the
is
parking
zero
lot.
tolerance.
Would you
So
agree?
If you
Okay.
have
I don't,
any drug in
It's
your
not
system.
defined, then it would be.
But you could go to the sidewalk that
Yeah, you
abuts
could- you should
the
went to the
facility,
sidewalk.
and you could have all the beers you want, as long as you don't get out of hand.
yeah,
Right.
we had to kill time somehow, right?
So here's another question, and this is maybe one of, may never happen, but since the federal government hasn't changed the law yet, would the fact that we have an ordinance that allows these products in our parks preclude us from obtaining federal grants that might help offset the cost of some of our?
I don't think that's of concern. It's worth putting out there, but I don't think that's gonna be an issue for us.
Okay.
We'd
We
run
want all
into,
the
It's
money
still
we can
illegal
get.
according to the federal government.
yeah, we'd run into problems if we'd made it like a misdemeanor instead of a petty misdemeanor within our city ordinance, and then that gets shot down by the state Supreme Court, and then, but
Well,
I don't
that's-
think that you could get into anything else.
Well, that's why it's already stipulated, that's like off the table.
This is what you do. Your petty misdemeanor, that's it.
It's a
I don't-
civil,
I think on
it's a
the
civil
state parks,
disobedience.
Yeah, I think
It
everyone's.
does say that, as of right now, the state parks, state law applies to possession of use and drugs. So it says that it is not permitted.
What about smoking tobacco?
It's very small, like it talks mostly about alcohol.
So it doesn't say anything.
No. But this is alcohol and drugs. Let me
There's
see if I
probably a
can
whole
find.
nother tab.
Oh, here, smoking, sorry. Smoking is prohibited indoors within 30 feet of park buildings.
That's it.
So you could smoke at your campground, essentially. That would be
As long as you're not
acceptable.
close to the building.
Yeah, so, yeah, stipulating the space.
Figured as much. I don't know. I think we're all somewhat in agreement that if you're creating a noxious cloud around you for others to be in that area, that that's something that we should probably put an ordinance together. I think we end up getting kind of gray and not really sure when it comes to edibles and when you should, when you can't chew, booze. Well, no, we've got the rules on booze, we've got
the
wine,
rules on
beer,
tobacco.
and malt liquor that we can possibly use in a park on a trail.
We don't have rules on tobacco
No,
right
but I
now.
mean, as a city, we have rules on tobacco,
Indoors.
Indoor.
Indoors, yes.
Oh, not
but we don't
outdoors.
have anything for parks, for tobacco. Is that
Correct.
And the indoor piece comes from state law, not city ordinance.
Okay.
We're governed as the Minnesota Indoor Clean Air Act.
Minnesota State Statute,
Mhm.
number 63. No,
I mean, I am
19.
in agreement with your kind of summary that, and it seems like everyone has kind of gone around like, well, isn't like tobacco-free policy for parks like needless regulation? Like, are we working on something that hasn't been a problem yet if we haven't seen it be a problem? But it's saying, and I agree with this, that having a policy for like no smoking, is similar to having a policy that asks for people to have their dogs on leash. Like, it's in place to protect like the health and the citizens that are utilizing the park space. So,
But not everybody has their dog on a leash either.
Then they'll get a petty misdemeanor. I don't know what they get.
Well, then it gets
I
to the
think that's where
enforceability.
I'm sort of coming from, is we try to be so specific, so covering all aspects of everything, that we're not covering anything. You know, it's, like I said, perfection is the enemy of good. Let's get something good rather than trying to be perfect about everything.
I would, to a point, agree with you, except for the fact that as a citizen of Victoria, I would prefer not to have smoking of any kind in the parks that I'm in.
Well, that's fine, that's
So-
your opinion.
Yeah, that's what we're asking for here.
And I guess I would agree with that.
Yeah, so that's,
There we go.
And maybe.
but if you want to do a THC gummy, that's your own business. I
And-
mean,
and-
because it doesn't
and
affect me
It's gonna
unless
get to
you're
the point of
unruly.
enforceability. If someone's walking down a trail and they have a vape, no one's gonna know in the first place, you know? They might see it, they might see a cloud. By the time the cops show up, they're gonna be a mile down the trail, you know? So there's a kind of a practical, to the point of having a policy to be able to, on the positive side, you know, we're promoting wellness. I mean, I worked for the Minneapolis Park Board for a decade. I totally understand the wellness aspect to it.
I think that's where we go. I mean, that's the argument to the public. I mean, we're promoting health.
Mhm.
And to promote health, we have an ordinance that smoking isn't allowed in the park. You know, are
And
some
then
people gonna,
define, then do you define smoking as tobacco and
tobacco use or.
tobacco,
Whatever.
marijuana, cannabis, and any other
Right.
smokable, I mean, who knows what people are
Peyote?
smoking? Right, who knows what people smoke?
What do people smoke? I don't know.
And I think
Do
as,
that, smoke and crack is just fine.
That's what I'm saying, like, is it all
There's another
drugs?
statute, I
Oh,
think,
wait a
on
minute,
that.
no, that's a different law.
I mean, that's for the attorney to figure out,
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
It's not our deal.
It's the dog
But
poo that was the biggest.
however you define whatever people happen to think up to smoke next, you know.
That's
it'll
legal,
be-
because we're only talking about legal smoking.
Right.
usually you just keep it very generic where you say smoking and vaping and it covers
Yeah.
whatever
Christian could come up with.
Yeah, perfect.
I think smoking and vaping is good. I think it's vaping when you see it just, you know, the cloud that comes out off of some of those folks. I'm like, I used to breathe that in. Yuck. Yeah. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah.
It's when you were driving up the streets like I was in New York.
Has this been helpful, or are you just like, this was?
Worse.
Extremely helpful.
Muddy.
No,
Clear as
there's
mud.
a lot of clear in this conversation, so thank all of you again for taking the time to have this conversation and just being really honest what your thoughts and feelings are. As we all have learned this evening, the law that the state has given us is very complicated, and it's so complicated that it almost doesn't give us any rules at all. So we're just trying to figure out what's the best path forward for us as a community. What we'll do as staff is we'll kind of look this over and generate some sort of language for a possible ordinance, and that will come back to both these committees for further review and discussion once we actually have some red line language for us. So again, thank you all, and I think we all really appreciate this. This was great.
One thing on health kind of scares me a little bit. And this is gonna be another far shot off a little bit, but you know, there's some folks that may say, hey, I would have died of stress 10 years ago if I didn't smoke. So I'm always just a little hesitant on using health as a reason for people to stop smoking for whatever reasons. Sure, cardiovascular, there's a billion different studies that say it's bad for you and you're gonna knock off 10 years of your life. How many more years of your life would you have knocked off if you wouldn't have done it? We'll never know. That's something that can't be studied. So health always scares me a little bit, and that's just my opinion. You probably have everybody else who doesn't agree, but I just wanted to throw it out there. Thank you.
I'd like to follow up on this gentleman's suggestion of taking a look at what happens with problems and enforceability and issues that come up in the other parts of the county in the next 6 months. And let's see really how many problems do come up and how they're handled.
Well, in the intervening period, the ones that have already taken action, how many citations were issued as a result of the change in policy?
We seem to be a community that's pretty proactive in engaging our residents in surveys, and I know there's a cost to doing the survey. Has there been any thought to putting that out there? I know it's a pain in the, but I mean, we put out surveys like, what do you think about the parking in downtown? Well, we all know what everyone thinks about the parking in downtown, but we still did it. So I'm wondering, you know, if we're trying to be proactive for our citizens, maybe we need some kind of majority citizen input. Not that people input very regularly.
I would just caution this, given this issue and so many special interest groups on each side of it, you might have like a.
Well, people will weigh in that will never go to a park.
People will weigh in that don't even live in Minnesota.
Well,
like it will go out on the network of like.
Next door.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
that happens.
It's a very emotional topic also, and we just don't know enough right now. And you have to remember that we also have a local business who's interested in opening a dispensary, so we have to be very, you know, cautious of their future goals too. And again, that's a topic for a later date, but we also have to remember the economic impact that it has in communities, so we're looking at that angle too. I don't think we know enough information right now to get resident feedback.
But it would be nice to know about, like, okay, in the next, or even after the ordinance is passed, has there been any complaints of people violating the ordinance, and, you know, is it even an issue?
Well, and I think to me, yeah, they're doing stuff, but since it's not readily available, how many people are actually getting it and using it? So until it's
readily available, than you think.
It's readily available.
But I mean.
Yeah, I think it's out there, whether it's legal or not.
Where, you know, like, you can buy alcohol anywhere, you can buy, you know, cigarettes anywhere. You can't legally buy this anywhere, and then until there's that availability there, you are you not going to see as big a problem until it's readily available.
Well, and if there is a dispensary in Victoria, that would just elevate the possibility of people smoking in Victoria. You
And
know, I mean, it does change, you know,
And I think-
procurement is part of it.
And I think people who have been using marijuana for some time are using it. They're using it in their homes or wherever. They're probably going to continue using it in their homes, but
Sure.
if there's no regulation, it could, you know, get out in parks. And if we take from the health, just overall smoking health perspective, let's not expose people who don't want to be exposed to it. People can still do their, you know, smoke their marijuana or whatever, just can't do it in parks. And I think we're out in front of it. You know, do we want to have the sheriff, you know, spending all day going through the park trying to
No.
catch somebody? No, but I think that if it gets to be a problem, there's a whole bunch of people show up and they're having their pot smoking party, then they have the ability to go and say, no, you can't do this in the park, and then that's the end of it. As opposed to it's there, and then you got all those people showing up here saying, oh, now you're picking on us because we're whatever. I think just get out in front of it and be done with it, so, my personal opinion.
One more thing as an adjunct to the retail establishments wanting to sell. One of the things in California and various cities have come up with, there's a lot of requests to have smoking lounges attached to the dispensaries, where you can't bring your own in, you have to buy it there, you have to smoke it there. What you do after that is, you know, up to you. And that may be something that'll come up as part of the dispensary sale.
Well, they already have, they have a place to smoke the cigars outside, so that could very well happen.
Right.
Yeah, you're right.
Is this?
I don't think they'll bother anyone there because everybody's smoking them. They're happy.
Churchill's would be my guess.
Yeah, it is.
He's talked to the city council about that. So I think we're almost very split on if we want to be looking at an ordinance today, or if we want to wait until 2025 when this is actually more readily available.
I don't
Is there
think
any direction from this group on when we should start? Because we could go either way as staff.
I think we need to start. I think we need to start putting paperwork together. Now, whether we wait till 2025 to pass it, I mean, we don't want to be 2025 and sitting here doing what we're doing today. I think we need to be doing research, putting something together, running it past these.
City council.
The commissions, and when we feel that we want to pass it on to council, or if council says, no, we want to do it, then we do it. But, I mean, they're the governing body that says, yeah, we want it today, go put it together. But I don't think we want to wait till 2025 and be having the discussion we're having today in 2025, because I think then we're just we're just going to throw something out there that every other city's doing and try to put it in place, where I think if we have some groundwork done and a rough ordinance semi in place by this time next year, you know, I mean, I don't know how long it would take you guys to do that. Then all of a sudden you're scrambling to throw something together. And I think we need to work on it and be able to put something that we're not scrambling at the last minute to throw together.
I would agree. I don't see any reason from a health and wellness perspective to ban smoking in our parks right now. Honestly, I actually didn't realize you could smoke in the parks. I guess I haven't read the city code, but, cover to cover, but, you know, I don't see any reason why we wouldn't move forward with more of a general smoking in public parks prohibition, just from that, hey, we're promoting wellness and health, and there's concerts and there's other things that, you know, families are at and children are at. I don't know why we wouldn't try to move forward with that. And I think if cannabis wasn't being legalized, I would still want to move forward with, you know, a smoking ban in the parks, so.
Smoking and noxious gases.
Smoking whatever that defines in generality, right?
I mean, I said earlier, I thought it was a miss that we had all these things about rules in the park and we had nothing on smoking in general. So I agree with moving forward.
I think that's consensus. Thank you for that clarification. Unless there's anything else, Chair, I'll pass it back to you.
Okay. Hearing no more discussion, I'll ask staff, is there any other miscellaneous items?
No.
Members, any,
Be very careful going outside. Apparently there's black eyes.
there's some slick spots out there on this sidewalk.
Yeah.
Who's responsible for taking care of that parking lot across the street? Is that city? Is that private?
Victoria Flats.
Victoria Flats. City
Have the
parking lot.
Parking lot that's out.
any other-
That's ours.
Ours was slip.
The only other discussion I have is,
I
this
move to
weekend
adjourn.
is,
Yeah.
Saturday is the Victoria Lights Christmas.
Thursday.
Thursday.
It's like, yeah, 7 o'clock.
Thursday,
on the
okay, Thursday.
7 o'clock, 6 o'clock on the midnight.
In a couple days.
Yeah,
You can't come anyway, but
so,
if you want to go and
members
see
here,
if anyone's
hearing
smoking.
there's no
If you wanna
more,
go smoke in the park, then go ahead.
This is your
and
chance,
your
people.
license.
You want to smoke, join this week.
hearing no more items before the body, I ask for a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Yeah, motion made and second, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you, motion carries.